Welcome to the National American Indian Court Judges Association's Tribal Legal Advocacy Training webinar on peace circles as an option for criminal jurisdiction. The National American Indian Court Judges Association is a national nonprofit membership organization devoted to supporting and strengthening tribal justice systems through education, information sharing, and advocacy. NAICJA provides broad and comprehensive training and technical assistance to support tribal justice system capacity building and partners with national organizations to educate the broader legal community and public about tribal courts and judges, and builds relationships between tribal and state court judges. Next slide. The National American Indian Court Judges Association, NAICJA, is the tribal justice training and technical assistance provider under the Bureau of Justice Assistance, BJA, Tribal Civil and Criminal Legal Assistance, TCLA program, offering training and technical assistance to TCLA grantees and sub-grantees legal aid organizations. NAICJA's TCLA program seeks to increase and improve access to legal assistance in Indian country by providing training and technical assistance for the development and enhancement of tribal justice systems. Further, TCLA will assist in strengthening the capacity and the quality of indigent criminal defense services and defense strategies for tribal justice systems. NAICJA is also coordinating and implementing a multi-part training series, including webinars, interactive virtual training modules, and podcasts covering the basics of tribal court advocacy. The training series is tailored for entry-level legal services attorneys, either just starting out or those looking to bolster their tribal advocacy skills. At the end of this webinar, we will provide information on how to access the rest of the tribal court advocacy training series. Our presenter today is Cheryl Demmert Fairbanks. Cheryl is Tlingit and Tsimshian, born in Ketchikan, Alaska. She is a senior policy advisor for the Native American Budget and Policy Institute, which conducts research, budget and policy analysis, social justice advocacy, and litigation to empower Native American communities to create self-determined and systematic change that will improve their health, education, and economic well-being. Cheryl has had a long career in Indian law as an attorney and tribal court of appeals justice. She recently was in Oregon serving as the Walter R. Echohawk Distinguished Visiting Professor of Law at the Lewis and Clark, and was a visiting professor of law at the University of New Mexico's Southwest Indian Law Clinic. Cheryl has been a previous partner of Cuddy McCarthy, LLP, and the law firm of Roth, Van Amberg, Rogers, Ortiz, Fairbanks, and Yepa, LLP, where she specialized in Indian law. She worked as a senior policy analyst with the New Mexico Office of Indian Affairs in the area of state tribal relations. There she was instrumental in establishing the Indian Child Welfare Desk, New Mexico Office of Indian Tourism, the University of New Mexico Indian Law Clinic, and the passage of the New Mexico Indian Arts and Crafts Act. Prior to her law career, she served as a teacher for the Albuquerque Public Schools, Zia Day School, and the administrator for Acomita Day School and the Albuquerque Santa Fe Indian Schools. In today's webinar, Peace Circles as an Option for Criminal Jurisdiction, we will have an overview of using a traditional justice practice, peace circles, as an option in criminal tribal court. Thank you for joining us today, Cheryl. We welcome you and we are excited and grateful for your presentation today.
Thank you, Elton, for that intro. And it's good to see everyone, and hello to everyone out there in Indian country, and Happy New Year. And a special thank you to NAICJA for inviting me, and Judge Whitener. We all go back many, many years, and it's just nice to really reaffirm each other's work. So, Ganesh. So we're going to talk about shifting, and it's really shifting our mindset. And we're going to talk about some guiding principles and why peacemaking. And there's always challenges. Our dear friend Sheldon always says, be an agent of change. And, that change is sometimes so challenging, we get lost in it. And so we're going to talk about the peace circle, the process, and some of the rules. They're really not rules, they're guidelines. And we're going to share some other tribal peacemaker models and really transitioning to being that change. And so, and we'll reserve some time at the end for Q&A. And so, as you know, American justice is in crisis. And interestingly, they're looking at our Native American processes for help. And we're really looking at restorative justice, transformational justice, and of course, our peacemaking. And peacemaking is really, nothing new for us as tribal people. It's been with us since time immemorial. And most often it's been called, in our own native language. And so a lot of times we get all those terms mixed up. So really think about it in terms of your own native language, because that's really what makes it unique to who you are. And so we're going to talk about different circles as well as the dispute resolution processes. And it's going to come through a Native American and Indigenous lens, hopefully. I'm working on putting this into Tlingit. And that's been interesting because I've had to change my whole mindset in a whole different way. And so part of this is having that openness to really reaffirm who we are as the Indigenous people of North America. And often because systems are in place, it's really hard to put that round peg into a square hole. So these are the guiding principles, or this is the shift that I really like to talk about because, with our peacemaking, and we call restorative justice and transformational justice our cousins, because we want to show that unity and not draw these lines between different theories. And so I think one of the main reasons that our peacemaking is so successful is that we have a spiritual element to it. And it's our Native American spirituality and our way of life and our guidance that's been passed to us from generation to generation. And also, not only is it spiritual, but speaking is an important part in people speaking for themselves. It's holistic, and we're moving from a punitive mindset to one that's healing. And it's very issue focused. Some people will say, oh, go to peacemaking, it's going to be easier. No, it's very, very challenging. It's complex, but there's a simplicity in terms of we're focusing on the issue. So we're tough on the issue and we're gentle on the person. And it has to be very facilitated. Um, and usually I like to work with a co-facilitator because many of the issues are complex. And I may be missing something that the co-facilitator will pick up, or I may skip over. One time I skipped over the new stepmother, and she never ever had a voice. And it was like, oh my goodness. And my co-facilitator picked up and just came in, and we were able to have a circle of fairness and justice and equity where everyone has a voice, has a chance to speak. And of course, it's that transition to change. And it's really changed. And because we've been colonized and we've had our education was really designed to terminate or assimilate us into a whole different system. So that mindset is important. So all I'm asking is for you to have an openness and bring your own thinking into it, bring your own language, bring your own concepts so that we can work toward health and wellness and really a restoration of a healthy lifestyle and sustain our way of life in our respective communities. And we're able to use our own core values, not core values given to us by the state or federal government, but our own core values. And that's an important piece. I've tried to skip over the core values, it doesn't work. And that really, the language is what, and the core values together really provide the tools for getting to work, to working with our own people. And extended family and the community are most likely welcome. It kind of depends on the issue. And all our people really want is fundamental fairness, whether it's criminal or civil. And you've all been in a court system where there's a winner and there's a loser. You win, you lose. And if I'm winning, I'm happy. If I've lost, I've lost, especially in Indian law, we've lost for our whole family and our whole community. And we've put people away, we've taken children away. We're still having that separation from that beautiful community that we call home. And so for peace circles, I always say stand in your own sacred circle, and you really bring your own strength in and your own uniqueness, and not to be like someone else and be like the state court or be like the federal court, but it's really a chance to be like ourselves and really invest in our own wellness and our own sovereignty, whether we're protecting it or exercising it. And these are the guiding principles I just made up basically because as a tribal lawyer and a judge, there were times when I really put my own core values on the shelf and ignored them, and just fell in line with American jurisprudence and how it's important for us to treat each other with respect, love, and kindness. And so I felt like I had been facing the wrong way, and I really needed to just turn around. And when I did that pivot, I felt like I was standing in my own sacred circle, and I didn't have that devalue feeling that I felt in an adversarial setting where we could really empower each other. And it wasn't the Indian problem, it became the Indian solution. And so I also, when I'm working with tribes, we really have to understand the impact of federal policy on all of us, every single one of us. And some of the lawyers I've met with and judges have said, well, I'm not impacted by that. I pretty much have my language, culture, and tradition intact. And that's not true with a lot of us. We've all felt the impact of those policies which were designed to terminate our way of life. And 3 is really important because understanding the significance of oral tradition and our native language is absolutely essential. And it's that oral tradition that's been the glue that's kept us connected from generation to generation against the strongest country in the world, the United States of America. So I really pay a lot of attention to the oral tradition. And that's where the integrity comes in. That's where you see if someone is truthful or forgiving, or there's an apology, or and actually, when we begin to use our own native language, there's so many beautiful, beautiful concepts that really provide for solutions. And when I say re-educate the educated, I'm not discrediting all of our education. All of us were taught, get a good education. We all know that. And education was very hard for me. I went to boarding school, left home when I was 12. That was a hard thing. I know Chief Justice Yazzie, when I listened to him, and he left when he was very young, and everything he had to withstand. And so when I say re-educate the educated, we now have these American jurisprudence principles. We know what that's about. We know what works. We know what doesn't work. So it's really an opportunity for us as tribal attorneys, as tribal judges, to really make a difference and to bring those 2 disciplines together in a way that works for us. So we're not just putting away our people and separating families. And then 5 is very, very important because there has to be a call for unity. And I say this from the bottom of my heart because it's a way to really affirm our core values. During the pandemic, I had a mentor and he passed away, but he always said to me, remember where you're from. Remember, you have 10,000 ancestors standing behind you and with you. And don't get in to another person or another way of life. Remember our values. Remember who prayed for us. And he said, in that unity, we're going to have the strength to make the changes and to really be able to justify how there are other ways to do things. There are other options that we can take a look at and that we can reaffirm through our own Indigenous lens, other ways to look at tough issues. And so when I say we've been facing the wrong way, I made this up because when I was home, actually right before the pandemic, I was home and I serve on the Supreme Court for Tlingit and Haida. And so I was flying back down and I had done a sovereignty circle. And I really thought, sovereignty really does begin at home. There's a lot we can do at home by ourselves without $1 million grants from everywhere. And so I coined that and I've used it. And it's really empowered me to really think about our people at home, our kids at home, our elders, our warriors at home who kept the fires burning while we were out getting our education. There are people there that have more wisdom than we'll ever have. And we have to really respect that, and that sovereignty begins at home. There's a lot we can do as tribal people. We don't always need fixing, and we don't always have to be in the victim mode. So it's a way of placing value on our ways. Of course, I said that, but we have to draw upon those tribal values and tradition and laws in a contemporary context. And I've been accused of going back to the blanket, oh, she wants everyone to hold hands and sing. Yeah, but I really know that we have to withstand the scrutiny, not just of the federal government and the state government, but our own governments and our own people. And because we've been colonized so much, we are afraid, we have that fear factor. Oh, what if it doesn't work? And so, this is a way to really believe in ourselves and stand in our own sacred circle. And so the next guiding principle is understanding the impact of federal policy. I, I, uh, I, in law school, I thought, no, I'm from Prince of Wales. We're far away. We don't, we were lucky. We have our subsistence way of life. We have our language. We have our songs. We have our clans. We have our stories. And boom, it hit me, that denial. And I really had to take a hard look at how these policies impacted us, especially as tribal lawyers. It really impacted us. And as people working in the government, it's very challenging to bring your Indigenous lens to the table. And for a long time, I wouldn't do it. I was like, oh, well, let's just do it their way. And I'm schooled in American jurisprudence. I love to win. I can zealously represent my client. I've been in private practice and on the bench for many years, and I like the win, but it's not winning for us as a people. So let's open ourselves up to some other ideas. And of course, all these policies, um, uh, I bring them up only because they were designed to assimilate and terminate, and they're very genocidal. And of course, the treaty making era, that before that, our sovereignty was really intact. And when you see the beautiful pictures of our people and how healthy and beautiful they were, we had a really wonderful way of life. And how we lived within North America was really a beautiful thing. And so the removal era, whoops, um, the forced removal of our Indian people from our homelands, whether it was the Trail of Tears or boarding school, and now it's ICWA and our separation from our way of life. All that had an impact on all of us. And as I was able to work on our Indigenous law library with some of the elders, and some of the stories that they shared was, at first they didn't want to share it, but then as they worked with each other, they began sharing and what they withstood for us to be able to be here as NAICJA, for us to be here, strengthening our sovereignty. They did a lot. So we owe a lot of credit to our elders. And in our Tlingit way, we, we give the credit to our grandparents. And of course, our parents, but we really honor our grandparents. Um, and of course, the reservation era, of course, it's all about civilizing the Indian savage. And there's a real military kind of method that is woven into all these governmental systems. And we were never valued. So we kind of took that on ourselves, is not valuing who we are. And one of the things the Chief Justice says at Clink and Haida is, because we have our core values, and I'll show those to you. And she says, hold each other up. Don't get hooked into that. Hold each other up. And she will not let us go off into the deep end somewhere. And I love that. And being an elder now, I look back at all my mistakes and I go, oh my God, I could have cut through all that. But, those mistakes were lessons learned. And so the allotment era, of course, we were all to be farmers. And for us, we're fishing people. Fishing is our way of life. But the allotment era really began that individual rights, the I, me, the individual ownership, the justification of the breakup of the land base. And the IRA, of course, in the 1930s, 1934, it was really put away your clan systems, put away your traditional governments, be like us, be like the United States of America. So you see all those boilerplate constitutions coming out, and the traditional governments were replaced. And of course, one of the most devastating eras was the termination era, where we had a lot of loss of language, movement to the cities, the relocation. We're feeling that in the big cities now. A lot of our people before the courts and state courts as a result of these policies. And so, and we are very regulated, of course. The Indian Civil Rights Act, and of course, the Indian Child Welfare Act was passed in 1978. And so the self-determination was really a breath of fresh air, where it was up to us. And we're like, what? Can we do that? And I was with the team when we took over the Albuquerque Indian School and the Santa Fe Indian School under 93-638 as a contract school. And really putting our Indigenous thinking as educators. And it was like, yeah, you think you guys are hotshot educators? Let's see how you do it. And boy, were we on the line. And, today the Santa Fe Indian School stands as a school of excellence. And with that beautiful new campus in Santa Fe. And we have a lot of GATE scholars, and a lot of 80% of the kids are going to higher ed. And I say Mississippi Band of Choctaw because I was fortunate, and I'm old enough to have been able to work with Chief Philip Martin, and he had that vision of economic development and to make lives better for his own people, his own kids. And now we're in an era of self-governance, and that's where peacemaking comes in. Why would we keep doing more of the same, expecting different results? That's insanity. And yet we're so quick to just accept and replicate what others have done. So it's time for us to roll up our sleeves and really look at what works and what doesn't. Because this oral tradition is important, the language is important. The person I love listening to is Chief Justice Yazzie, as he says it in Navajo, his Dene language, then he interprets it in English. And at first I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And then I started thinking, I thought, oh wow, I'm doing so good in my own language. And it's been challenging for me, but I was fortunate to have uh, language speakers all around me. But what was really tough on me is during this pandemic, as I was working on my peacemaking stuff and putting it into Tlingit, I was still thinking in English. And that just knocked me because my mentor said, Cheryl, you've got to be thinking in Tlingit. And I see Justice Yazzie, I see Christy Chapman, I see some of our elders, they're still thinking in their own language. And then that's bringing the absolute authenticity of our Indigenous ways into that circle. And so I've been really working hard at thinking in Tlingit, and it's been really tough. And I am two tribes, so the challenge is there. Because when we have our own native language, we have our cultural viewpoint woven in. And my dad always said, if you have the language, you have the law. And this is when I was having a discussion with him about, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And he just looked at me like, oh my God, what about our law? And so that's when I pivoted into rethinking what I was doing, because the state and feds all want us to be in one big melting pot, but we're all uniquely different. We have a nice thread that ties us all together, but our uniqueness comes through our language and our way of life, and our core values are pretty much aligned in a lot of ways, but each tribe has their own uniqueness. And that's what we as professionals, that's re-educating the educated, that we have to, not just a one size fits all. And so one of the things that's so beautiful about peacemaking is the respect for the elders and the wisdom they carry, and how, they're so, oh my heavens, just such a privilege. And now I am the elder. And so I just love working with the elders, and they're such a valuable resource. And through our peacemaking, they relax into it, and they're unifying, and they bring a presence. You just have an elder sitting in your circle. That's going to change the whole dynamics. And then the oral tradition, like I said, has really been the glue that's kept us together. And when I say re-educate the educated, let's pause and rethink not just our education systems, but our justice systems. We have time now to rethink that, and really use our education as the greatest tool for strengthening and protecting our sovereignty. And never, why I bring this up is sometimes we're participating in federal state policies that serve to terminate our own thinking and our own way of life. So we don't want to replicate the past termination and assimilation policies. And so the call for unity is really important, because my dad was my greatest teacher. He's a fisherman. And when you're on the ocean, there's the natural laws, and you better know what the heck you're doing out there. But what he said to me that resonated is, he said, I never thought I'd see the day where it was Indian versus Indian. And he says, now that's all we see in this community here. We're the Hinya Kwan. Remember that. We're the water people. We have to get along. We have to agree to disagree with a sense of respect. And so that unity principle is one way. And I think, peacemaking during these times, we're going to be speaking at a restorative justice conference in Chicago with the traditional and restorative people. And I had to make this up. I said, well, there are cousins, because we were kind of like, Chief Justice Yazzie is the one that talked me into going to one of their conferences. I go, no, I don't want to. I'm just struggling with my own thinking. And goes, no, we have to pay attention. We have to learn. We have to use that respect. We have to walk our talk. So when we went, wow, it was phenomenal. And I said to the chief, I said, hey, there are cousins, your cousins, you just love them, but don't you, they just drive you crazy sometimes? And like my grandmother said, your cousins are your brothers and sisters. That's how we grew up. So we're going to really try to bring this unity together and through our peace circles. And we've done some really great sovereignty circles that really brought some truth and reconciliation. And I like to add resiliency because we're a very resilient people. So why peacemaking? And really, the main principle I have as to why is whenever you have a continuing relationship like we have with each other, we have to do something different, or you polarize the whole community, you polarize the whole organization, you polarize a family. And so so it's called, Itikana Ikbi for Tlingit people. The deer stands as our peacemaking symbol. It's not mediation. And yes, it can be formal, but yes, it can also be informal. And Justice Yazzie gets me going, and he goes, "You're getting too dicey, Fairbanks. You're dicing it up. You're splitting hairs. You're drawing lines that don't need to be drawn." And so, it really is. It can be a division of the tribal court, like at Mississippi Band. It's a division. They have 4 divisions in the lower court, and it also results in a consensus agreement that everyone participates in. So you don't have to have probation officers going, number 4, did you comply with number 4? No, you didn't. Oh, well, you're gone. No, everyone becomes invested in helping the person make the change. And are we going to change overnight? Hey, I'm getting old. I'm not going to change. It's really hard to get to change, but we have to do something different. And is it the answer to everything? No, that's why I call it an option. It's an option for consideration. And so it's really based on a holistic philosophy, unwritten customary law, and it's really circles of justice that connects everyone. And I borrow that from my sister Ada Pecos Melton from Jemez Pueblo. And there it is, whenever you have a continuing relationship. And really, there's no anonymity in Indian country. You might think there is, but not really. And important about peacemaking is we don't have a lot of volumes of rules and statutes and, big libraries. Process is very important and emphasized. And that's all our people want, is a fundamentally fair process. And so the law evolves from the process. Sometimes it's common sense. Sometimes there's a solution that's very complex, but language is key and consensus is necessary. And consensus is a very important skill as we're doing peacemaking. And of course, it brings a spiritual element to a difficult situation. I've tried it with prayer. I've tried it without prayer. Guess what works? Prayer. I had a student at the law school in Oregon, and he goes, Fairbanks, I just can't do the prayer. And I go, well, what will you do instead? And he goes, oh, and wow, to set the sacred space for peacemaking, he did phenomenal. He had music, he had poetry. The whole thing was just like amazing. So anyway, Choctaw, Mississippi Band, has their Itikana Ikbi, and it's a division. They have 4 lower court divisions: civil, criminal, youth, and peacemaking. And sometimes the criminal feeds into that peacemaker, because the peacemaker really has the wisdom and the Mississippi Band language and concepts of how to really deal with some of these domestic violence issues. I was talking with a peacemaker. The way he dealt with domestic violence blew me away, because a lot of times people say no, no to domestic violence, not in peacemaking, but the way he did it was profound. And so the peacemaking process can be established either by oral tradition, as in some tribes, or by tribal ordinance. And so, like I said, it really focuses on process and making things right and to repair. Prayer is used at the beginning, at the end, and it really brings a spirituality to it for both civil and criminal. And the use of customary law and traditional law or indigenous law. And it builds on trust and relationships to promote healing and really to restore and to really preserve relationships. And usually there's no attorneys. This is a tough one. And I know Chapman and I just did one in Albuquerque, and we excused the attorneys, and the attorneys looked at us like, what? And we're like, you can review the consensus agreement. We'll have a break if you want to talk to your client, but right now it's going to be the group here, and everyone will be speaking for themselves. And it really works phenomenally well. Some people have said, I've never been able to speak for myself. We had a situation where it involved a chief, and he goes, when his attorney left, it was kind of a pause, like, are we doing the right thing? And so you as the peacemaker really have to think through what you're doing. And when people begin to speak for themselves in the circle, they're very empowered and they're very solution oriented, and they're going to follow the consensus agreement in a much different way than an order of the court. I'm going to order you to do this, or I'm going to hold you in contempt. Do you get it? So this consensus agreement is very, very important. And there's no time limit. Sometimes it takes forever. And I did one once where I had to take a recess because it was spiraling down really fast. And a lot of tears, a lot of blame, a lot of shame, all that. And I really like that in terms of peacemaking is put it in the shade. I learned that from the Ho'oponopono people. Put it in the shade, let it calm down a little. And so be tough on the issue and gentle on the person. Sometimes in Indian country, we're so tough on the person, we forgot what the issue was. So shifting over to the issue, and the community right may supersede the individual right. Our collective rights are very important in Indian country. Apologies are important. Forgiveness is essential. And the agreement is usually either, depending on what your code says, it either stands alone as an order of the court, of the peacemaker court, or you put it in as stipulated if it's coming in from the civil or criminal or youth court. And of course, it can be given full faith and credit or comity. And when it's done, it's done. So I borrowed this from Judge Hilda Nicky, who served as the Chief Justice for Mississippi Band, and she serves on the council. And she says, because tribes are skeptical about this, and often they get hung up on the word peacemaking. Therefore, Choctaw went to Itikana Ikbi, and we had, so the peacemaking is really the Western English term. But what I love about what Justice Nicky said, it's a way to put some of our people way back into our justice system. And I like this because you can think, it helped me think it through, peacemaking through coming from an American jurisprudence lens. And I worked with a Choctaw linguist on this. And so I hope none of you are Choctaw. And so Chata Okla really goes to the community and the importance of our community and the collective right of the community. And in American jurisprudence, it's individual, I, me, my rights. And Itibaka Chafa goes to cooperation and collaboration and really working together to find solution. And American jurisprudence is I win, you lose. I'm schooled in American jurisprudence. I love to win. But sometimes in that win, there's no justice. And iti halalia, we're all related. Everything, it's all related. And in American jurisprudence, separation of powers. In peacemaking, we like to think more of balance of power. It takes all of us to do the heavy lifting. So, foundational principles for working with criminal. And if you've ever sat with someone in the jail, you know how broken they are, you know how sad they are, and they know they're going straight to jail. And so we have to do something in our systems to really look at a pretrial or a diversion model. What can we do to make a difference in this individual's life? And I once worked with a medicine person who had drank, and there was violence involved. It's sad. And when we brought him into the peace circle with his family, it was very humbling, very, very humbling, very, very sad. Very healing, though, very healing. And everyone bought into the plan. And part of that plan was treatment. And so the other thing is post sentencing. And I like this, especially when you're dealing with a system. Let's say, for example, at Choctaw, they may sentence you to, 4 months in jail and $300 fine. You can defer that if they go into peacemaking and have a plan. And if they finish that plan, then this sentencing will be expunged, or however your code works. But it's really a good chance because you have that. If they don't, they're going to jail and they're having to do the sentence. So they have that hanging over them and they're buying in a little bit more. And so the other, and I haven't thought it through enough, but I'm working with a tribe where we're trying to use it in probation because our people are breaking their probation all the time and they're going smack into jail. And so we're really trying to use the healing, the power of the circle to really help that individual stay on probation, not just leave them out there or her out there by themselves. And yeah, if you see the recidivism and how our people are breaking probation, we have to do something else. So here's a chance as an option to do something else. These are Klinget, Simpson, and Haida values that I use. I always have them close, and I always get my answer. And the bonus of being a peacemaker is some of the own issues you're dealing with come to light in a circle, and the answers, that's just a little extra bonus. But one thing is you have to have patience, and that be strong in mind, body, and spirit is very, very important because as a peacemaker, you have to be very balanced. And the Indian humor is very healing. Did you know it builds your immunity, especially during this COVID pandemic we're in? And, we have that Indian humor. I don't know where we got it, but it is so dry, but it is so funny and it is so healing. And there's so many, and that's what we want is healing. One of the things is speaking with care, but in peacemaking, it's listening is very much valued. And be strong and have courage. And in Tlingit, it's iguayachan, be strong and have courage. And often you're saying that in the circle very quietly. So the person, you're giving that person the spiritual alignment to be strong and to have courage and to make change. So my husband is from Chippewa country, White Earth, but really I learned some of this from Patowski and the Chippewa Anishinaabe people. And I love it, the teachings of the 7 grandfathers, and is to cherish knowledge, is to know wisdom, To know love is to know peace. To honor all of creation is to have respect. Bravery, of course, honesty, humility, truth. And they have these on rocks, all in, and the circle is around that. And of course, you really need to get Judge Patowski and Judge Connors in on this because Patowski did his whole justice and peacemaking center around these values. And it just shows what a difference one person can make when we reaffirm our own Indigenous values. Of course, those federal policies really, and state policies really resulted in historical trauma. We're dealing with that trauma. We're also dealing with actual trauma and vicarious. And then we have the pandemic over it. So we really brought in people who are trauma informed, and they really help us as we think through a specific case. And I can't emphasize that enough. Why I would like to say, let's look at peacemaking as an option is we have a lot of Native Americans, 26,000 approximately, in the United States prisons and jails, 38% higher than the general population. And in Alaska, and I'm from Alaska, we make up 16% of the population and 38% of the incarcerated population. And for Native Alaskans, 40% of the prison population are Native Alaskans, and that's increasing. And what's increasing more is women are beginning to enter the prison system. So what's happening to our kids? What's happening to our elders if our adults are sitting in prison for years? And so we have to, stop doing more of the same and think of some other options, because the violence in our communities, we all know, we've all been touched by that. And it's sad. And our women suffer, and our men suffer, and our children suffer. This is coming from the Urban Indian Health Institute report, and it's online. I checked it. I put the little, I can add it in there. I thought I did, but I don't see it. The oldest victim on the MMIW was 83. The youngest was less than a year old, and 29 is the median age. And this data, when I saw that 5,712, I went back and looked at that report. And this was early on. And I thought that has to be a typo somewhere. And it was not. Oh, there's that site right there. And so that's probably a low number because there's a lot of underreporting. And I think we really have to shift, not just to the women, but to men, to our persons, because it's not just the women who are feeling it, it's all of our people. And so these are the 10 top cities. I live in Cedar Crest outside of Albuquerque, and in New Mexico, we have 2 cities, Albuquerque and Gallup, with a high rate. So we're really looking at, how can we do something different? We can sign all these MOAs and all that, but really through the Peace Circle, if we have more of a healing, and one of the things that I haven't seen except at UROC, I saw it, is how do we really get to my grandma, my baby girl, my granddaughter, my daughter, my auntie, my, sons, how do we get to them to protect themselves? And so as we move toward equity, we talk a lot about equality, and we've been at the table as tribal people, but often our voice is ignored, or do it this way, do it my way, or else. And so now that we're at the table, equity really speaks to the need to have our voice heard. And so that equity piece is an important way to have our voice heard. And in the Peace Circle, it's very wonderful because we're able to use the power of the circle so everyone has a voice at the table. And uh, so I think that this MMIW really needs to be expanded to persons, not just women, but to all persons. So peace circles, the process. Of course, when we're in circle, there's always, we're here for X, either a criminal violation, a domestic violence, a trespass, child custody. Um, it could be a juvenile matter. It could be a hunting and fishing matter. It could, the hardest ones are probate. You think child custody is hard? Yeah, but probate is really difficult. But there's always open with prayer, and if no prayer, a moment of silence to set the sacred space, because people are nervous. You're impacting their life, and we need to set that sacred space so that we're able to bring our core values into that circle. And even though we might know each other, if you don't set the sacred space, forget it. You're going to work double in that circle. So very important to set the sacred space, and for a person to hear their own voice. And of course, if it's a criminal, it depends on the kind of case, but the party filing a complaint goes first. Questions are allowed, but it's not just like, oh, I don't like this, boom. If you have a question or you disagree, let's have a solution to go with it. What else are you recommending? And the recess is very important because I always allow that so the parties have a chance to talk it out amongst themselves. Because a lot of times during difficult issues, they haven't been talking to each other. And so sometimes the social worker or the prosecutor or someone wants to get involved in that. No, let that family come up with a solution. And it's very powerful what they come up with because they know more than you do. They know more about what's going on than you do. And so it's important to have, closure. And I always put the basket in the middle at the end because I don't want someone to say, oh, they didn't let me talk, or I had a solution and they didn't let me give my solution. So I always put that basket in the middle. If we forgot something, now is the time. And I guarantee you, someone always picks it up. And it's very powerful because their voice is being heard. And it's very powerful because they're buying into the process and they're helping with the healing and they're helping with the solution. And usually it's memorialized in an agreement. Sometimes, depending on your court, it's an order, a consensus agreement, and sometimes it goes in as a stipulated order into the criminal or civil court. And of course, closing with prayer and a moment of silence and affirming each other, everyone's participation. And I'm telling you, this closure part is a very important piece of the peacemaking because often people have not spoken to each other for a long time, or they've been shamed that they don't want to, they just give up. So this whole circle procedure is an important part. Of course, the rules, I like what uh, Justice Ray Austin said. The rules are what any damn fool knows. And I went, oh my goodness. But we came up with these, we changed them, make up your own and get them from your core values so you own those rules. These are very flexible. They're guidance only. And it's really that rule of respect that I learned from my Setkwe, from my grandmother, that I bring into the circle. Speak with care and respect. Only one person talks at a time. We use the talking tool, a basket, um, and pauses are okay, especially with our tribal people. I had to get comfortable with a pause because as a lawyer, you pause for 2 seconds and we're going to jump in there and we're going to put our whole theory in there as to what we think should happen. So I had to be really, really careful with the pauses. And we listen with our heart and our mind, body, and spirit. And listening is more important than talking. Consensus is critical because it provides a way to build off of each other's ideas. Not just one person has the answer, but it's that collective wisdom, that collective solution. And on this, passing one's turn to speak, it's okay to pass. We don't have to make it into a big rule that's statutory. It means that I don't have anything to offer right now, so I like to pass. And then when I put that basket in the middle again, that person may pick it up. Or as a facilitator, I might give him or her another chance to say, hey, do you have something you want to add now that you've heard everyone? And usually the sacred space is set, so usually they'll participate. So we use this basket, and I did not bring my basket in here, but it's really the talking tool, and it really holds the sovereignty of the tribe and the respect and presence of the tribe. It's very empowering. It not only empowers you to speak, but it also empowers respect to make sure if there's 10 people in the circle, you have 1/10 of the time. And you don't have one person taking over the whole circle. Tears, laughter are in that basket. It's symmetrical. My grandmother was a weaver, and she always said, each part of this weave is important. You're just that one little design right there, but without you, it's flawed. And so everyone is valued, and each part of the weave is important to the whole. You're you're the design. You're the part of the beauty of it, and it really represents our sovereignty. And that basket, I did a training with the federal mediators coming out of all of the district federal courts, and I thought, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. And you know what they loved? They loved the basket. And I said, if you start using the basket, make sure you buy a good tribal basket, an authentic native basket. But they really use this, they begin to use this as one of their tools for mediation. So there's a lot of power in the circle. It's really indigenous, and also it allows us to experience each other as equals. No one's above, no one's below. And then the group in the circle become united in a real nice spirituality, and that energy forms to build resolution. And I always say face to face, when you're face to face in that circle, there's a real power, there's a real truthfulness. And like ripples of water, it brings about the change. And so these are the other peacemaking models throughout. There's more than this, but I just wanted to show that, tribes are making a change, and they're looking at reaffirming their own ways. And for example, Navajo Nation is redoing their bar exam. So it's more based on Dene principles, language, and customary law. And so I've worked with most of these tribes, and they're all different. They all have different ways of handling peacemaking. But I will tell you, these traditional courts of Cochiti and Taos, theirs aren't written. And they have their language, and they have their ways. And I don't exactly know, that's that sovereignty is theirs unto themselves. And I think we're very fortunate to have tribes who still have their own traditional methods and their thinking and their language. And of course, we've been impacted by the policies, but it's nice to know that they were able to withstand the scrutiny of those assimilation and termination policies. I borrowed from Ho'oponopono. We have a Ho'oponopono families over in Hawaii that we're working with. And they tried to go through the system, the bar, and put this into the judiciary and all that. But the auntie, her name is Auntie Lynette, she's trying to get Ho'oponopono into every one of the villages. So sovereignty begins at home. We begin working through these issues before they get into a institutional system that goes to incarceration, that goes to a punitive kind of treatment. And there's aligns so much with our Native American peacemaking, the pule, the prayer, the spirituality, statement of the problem, recognition that the injurer and injured are bound together by, the blaming And so stop that and move to healing. And grudge and fault are released from the one holding it. And ho'omalu, that's where I got put it in the shade, take a recess, calm it down. And it's interesting because when there is apology and forgiveness, the injurer and injured can be released from each other's pain, because there's all kinds of layers to these issues. Some we know, some we'll never know. But forgiveness goes to the healing and wellness, and then the formal and binding statement of commitment and releasing from the wrong, so that you can be released from it and it moves toward wellness. So the wrong is separated from the person, and it's being gentle on the person and tough on the issue, and then the prayer, and it's over, but keep moving forward. And Manu, one of the peacemakers, has an article out, and she aligns it to like holographic, where everyone is included. We're not, you know, divvying up by race, gender, whatever, but it's this beautiful holograph with little different lights and squigglies and perspectives, like a crystal, like Judge Patowski uses that crystal. You're able to look at it from all different kinds of viewpoints. So UNDRIP, of course, peacemaking aligns with UNDRIP, and that we as Indigenous people have the right of access, and access for just and fair procedure to resolve conflicts, and to use our own customs, tradition, and rules. And I love looking at UNDRIP because they really thought through the Indigenous lens a lot. And this again, I had to look up juridical because I didn't know what that meant, and it I thought, is that a typo? But it's not. It's relating to judicial proceedings and the administration of law and jurisprudence. We've always had that in our communities since time immemorial. It's nothing new. We learn to live side by side. And so let's reaffirm that. Let's look at it as an option and transition. And I say build bridges. And I really spoke when I came up with this bridges thing. I was working with some non-native peacemakers, and we were in Arizona, and we thought, hey, instead of building walls, we can build bridges. And so I like the concept, and it's not fully developed, and but I think it stands on its own. And Judge Thorne, who's one of our preeminent judges in the country, and he came to our judicial symposium in Texas. And I was a little worried because I know he sits in an adversarial system in Utah on the bench before he retired. And I didn't really know him that well, but he is such a proponent of peacemaking. You know, we got it into NAICJA's policies as an option for workers to consider on ICWA cases. And it was through him opening the door for that. But he said the forum at Alabama Coushatta was, and I can't see this, okay. This forum was an example of how with open minds, and that's when I challenge you to bring an open mind and goodwill, where parallel justice systems can learn from each other. One's not above the other or below, but parallel, discovering new approaches to serving communities and avenues for cooperation. And this is a group of peacemakers. We met in Texas, and they're, you know, they never gave up. They just kept moving forward. A lot of setbacks. And Casey Foundation, the person on the left is a peacemaker, Joanne Batiste, and the person on the right serves on the Supreme Court, Justice Byrne. And Casey gave them baby blankets to make sure we never forget about our children. And because these children are young parents, and how we treat our children is how we will be treated when we return to our childhood as elders. And of course, Sheldon, Spotted Elk, agents of change. Be the agents of change. And let's move toward equity where it's just and fair and it's inclusive. And so tribal courts are an essential component of tribal sovereignty. And within those tribal courts are our values, our customary law, our language, and our process. Sometimes it's not called peacemaking, but I've seen where some of our tribal judges, like Patowski, like Briscoe, they bring their tribal values onto the bench. And so I say the law often does not have an answer or solution for every situation. And not all situations belong in the courts. Let's shift and explore other options. Let's really shift to something that's more spiritual, because that's really been our way of life, where everyone has a chance to speak, something that's more holistic, so that wellness and healing are part of the plan, that's issue focused. People have to be held accountable. There's responsibility. There's rights, and it's facilitated by people who really are solution oriented, and that we can transition to change. And really, let's keep it simple. And I just love the power of the circle, and I like that little arrow thing of the symmetry and really considering options and strategies that we can leverage to effectuate change. And I say sovereignty begins at home as a ripple effect, as an individual, um, as a family, as a community, as a nation, as a world, as the universe. That ripple effect can happen. And when I say sovereignty begins at home, I have to take my own medicine because I'm not good with this. And I know Victoria is over in Hawaii, and I know she's doing self-care. And when I see her there, I'm going, oh my God, I should be doing that. Self-care, be gentle with yourself, extend kindness, move toward wellness and collective healing. You know, it's all about self-care, self-care. Well, as I was doing this with our judges and our community members, I really like the collective healing when we're together. We're not just all about self. We get a lot of that healing from each other. And that's an Indigenous lens. And so we're really empowering our citizens, getting them out of the victim mode and not just incarcerating and separating our tribal people from a way of life. And we're safe and we're secure. So our vision has to be healing, change, peace, and of course, prosperity. We're resilient, shift happens. And so be resilient. Ganashish, and that's thank you and Tlingit. And we'll stand for questions.
Thank you for that presentation, Cheryl. It was very valuable information for us to be able to process and use, but we want to thank you for that lovely presentation. We do have a couple of questions here for you. The first question is, for a tribe wanting to start using peace circles in their criminal court, what tribal stakeholders are important to get to the table in support?
Oh my goodness. That is a very good question. One of the things, and by the stakeholders, of course, it's important to get your judges, your prosecutor, your defense attorneys in there, but equally important is that community. And you have to meet with the community. When we were setting up peacemaking in several small communities, we had to have the community voice represented because they were a little afraid of it. They were like, what is that? No, we just want the bench and the gavel and the black robe, you know. But of course, food always helps. And so we'd have these sessions. And at Alabama Coshada, you know, it took us quite some time on weekends and evenings to really get the community engaged. Because we're such a different mindset in how we think about justice. So it's important to get everyone to the table, and everyone has a voice to speak, and do it in a peace circle. Don't just have your corporate table there and Robert's Rules of Order running wild, um, but really have your stakeholders, and there should be elders there and speakers of the language.
Great, thank you for that. And we have another question here. In which ways have you seen a tribe's unique personal cultural practices used in the peace circle process?
Mm. Well, Ron has been to my home, and it's a very small village. And we did a peace circle in the village, and I was able to co-facilitate with a very experienced peacemaker. We didn't know each other. Our families knew each other, okay? But interesting, and I didn't know this was going to happen, and we were co-facilitating. But he went out into the forest, because we live in the rainforest, and he went and got our medicine. And he just brought that big medicine in, about this big maybe, and put it right in the middle of the circle. No one had to say, oh, this is our medicine, this is blah, 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 it stands for this, it stands for that. No, everyone knew. And that medicine just was there. And then when at the end of the circle, he took it and he went and buried it in our beautiful rainforest. And I've seen other tribes use song. I've seen, stories that become lessons. And really what's critical is the language, because our language doesn't have those rough edges. It lends itself to that peace mindset already. And so language, when you have the language, you have the law. When you have the language, you have the core values. And at Mississippi Band of Choctaw, that core values that I showed you, that red poster, Choctaw has their core values as a woven basket. And under each one of their core values, they have two elders saying what respect means in Choctaw and then in English. So they don't, one person is just not the expert, it's the collective wisdom. And so, up at Pokagon, they use the fire, and I had to weave a basket up there, and I will tell you, we had the basket weavers come in while we were talking about the traditional knowledge. It was so powerful, but I was so nervous. Are we going to accomplish what we wanted? And we all had these beautiful woven baskets as we learned the culture and tradition and how to better relate and how to strengthen the court system. Thus, we're strengthening the sovereignty. Thus, we're having a healthier, well community.
I have a question.
Sure.
So I was out with doing some work out with Suquamish, and Suquamish tribe here in Washington State had a tribal member who was killed by a local non-Indian law enforcement agency at a nearby town. And they're using peacemaking circles not to really solve any particular problem, but try to rebuild the relationship between the tribe and this non-Indian community that sort of surrounds it. Are you seeing more and more of peacemaking expanding into beyond things like sentencing circles and into community, like different communities, including non-Indian communities working?
Yes. I think that's where our cousins from restorative and mediation and transformational justice come in, because around the border towns, there's that major tension. On Gallup, we're helping fund a program over there to get that community talking to each other. In Maine, in Dawnland, they weren't going to move forward because they didn't want to deal with the truth. They just wanted to deal with reconciliation. And we're having a major peacemaking in May, up in Maine, where we're bringing Indian and non-Indian stakeholders together to see how we can work side by side, like Judge Thorne said, parallel systems of justice. But Yazi and myself are trying to get, and Manu in Hawaii, trying to get it before it gets into a system, so that we're just dealing with our communities in a way that we're not governed by an institutional system that reeks of racism and white supremacy and whatever, you know. And so these peace circles, in Texas, we used it with a state tribal negotiation, and you know, that was pretty hard, but at the end we got a good solution. So I think it's going to provide, and as we work with our cousins, restorative, transformational, and mediation, sorry, we're learning from each other. And Mano from Hawaii is saying that holographic viewpoint, you know, being inclusive, and not just the ethnocentricity that we sometimes get about the Klingons, you know. And Judge Patowski using his crystal, looking at it from different perspectives. And I find it to be very, very healing and very, very powerful.
Thank you.
Great, and thank you for that question. I believe that's all the questions we have. If you want to go to the next slide, Cheryl, we can end the presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, and if you have any questions about this webinar, please email us at info@naija.org with the subject line as the title of the webinar, Peace Circles as an Option for Criminal Jurisdiction. You can access the rest of the Tribal Legal Advocacy series through our website at naija.org and through links shared on our social media and Facebook and Instagram. Thank you.
Ashish.